Hey guys, I'm Leo Mendez and today I have a new video. I got on my mesa de prueba the Moog Music Werkstatt with the CV Expander, a perfect analog synthesizer to start in the world of synths that you can actually assemble. If you want to learn more, acompáñenme a ver el siguiente video. If this is the first time you're in my channel, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Werkstatt was launched more than 7 years ago. Since then, this mighty analog synthesizer has been a really important tool for those beginners out there. And now with this relaunch that also contains the CV Expander, it became an even more creative tool since you can connect it with other modules that probably you already have. Also, for all those who are thinking of getting started in analog synthesizers, the Werkstatt-01 has the precise parts to be able to understand firsthand what an analog synthesizer is. The first thing we're gonna do is assemble our Werkstatt. To be honest, the assemble process is pretty easy and fun. The directions are super straightforward and I have this feeling of being part of the production line of Moog Music. From the unboxing to the assembly took me about 30 minutes, and if you want to see a video, I'm gonna leave a link down below. Well, now, as you may see, the Werkstatt is assembled and ready to play. The detail I like the most about the Werkstatt is that it's a fully functional synthesizer that perfectly shows us the basic parts of a subtractive synthesizer. So the first section we're going to talk about is the oscillator module. Let's take a listen. On the panel, we have a frequency selection knob, 2 waveforms, and a pulse width modulation knob that only works when the square waveform is selected. Now let's audition our sawtooth waveform. Just as a reminder, in this waveform our pulse width modulation does not affect. As you may have noticed by now, our oscillator is always running, so once we power up our synthesizer, our oscillator will be oscillating. And that's the reason why on our Werkstatt we have a set of tools to be able to modulate and control both the amplitude and the frequency of our oscillator. The next important section on any subtractive synthesizer is the voltage control filter. On this section we have 2 knobs. The first knob is the cutoff frequency, and let's take a listen. The second knob is resonance, and it helps us to emphasize a portion of the spectrum of our waveform. As you may see, although it's really fun to move some knobs, we still need more modulation and we only have 2 hands. In order to get more modulation, the Werkstatt has some modules that allows us to achieve it. First, let's talk about the modulation of the oscillator. But before explaining in detail, we must understand that in our Werkstatt we have 2 sources of modulation, the low frequency oscillator and also the envelope generator. The low frequency oscillator is a tool of constant modulation, and this means that LFOs does not need our interaction to start its modulation. Our second source of modulation is the envelope generator, and in this case it has to be triggered by the keyboard below. On the LFO we have 2 controls, the rate of the modulation and also the waveform of the modulation. On the envelope generator we have 3 controls. The first one is the switch of the sustain, and also we can control attack and decay. This envelope generator is considered to have 3 states. The attack time starts when we hit a note, the sustain stage represents a time while we are holding a note, and the decay time starts when we release the note. Now, having understood the modulation sources, we can select between the low-frequency oscillator or our envelope generator. In the modulation of the oscillator, we have three controls: the source that we just explained, the modulation amount, and the modulation destination. In this case, we can modulate the pulse width as well as the frequency on this knob. Next, let's modulate the pitch or the frequency on the oscillator. And now let's change the modulation source to the envelope generator. We need to trigger our envelope by playing one of our keys. The modulation destination can also be the pulse width modulation that we have here. The second modulation section affects the voltage control filter. In this section, we also have two modulation sources: the LFO and the envelope generator. We can also notice a modulation amount knob, as well as a polarity switch that is pretty useful for designing sounds. The first thing we're gonna try is to send the modulation of our low frequency oscillator to the cutoff frequency. We can also try a different waveform. And now let's audition with the envelope generator. Here you can notice how the modulation completely changed when we invert the polarity switch. So let's try both polarities. Usually, on all subtractive synthesizers, the amplifier section goes all the way at the end. In the VCA, we have two modes: the mode I have shown you, where it's always on, and the mode affected by the envelope generator. In this mode, the keyboard triggers the envelope that controls the VCA. The last function that we have on the panel is glide or portamento. Surely, the best part of this relaunch is have included the CV expander. In here we can find some control voltage inputs and outputs. For example, we have inputs to modulate our VCA, our filter, or even the oscillator. Also, we have voltage controlled output from our keyboard from the envelope generator, the low frequency oscillator, and many more. So let's start patching by sending the low frequency oscillator to the amplifier. Let's take our first cable and we're going to run it from the output of the LFO to the input of the VCA. Now let's use the voltage control of our keyboard to accelerate the LFO. So now let's use another cable to send the CV keyboard output to the input of the LFO. As we press higher keys, it will accelerate our LFO. Another classic patch is to use our keyboard as a source of a filter modulation. In this way, when we play our keyboard on the lower side, we will have darker sounds, and as we go up, we will have brighter sounds. To achieve this is pretty simple. We only need to send the output from our keyboard to the modulation input on the VCF. Another fun patch that we can make is that we can actually use our LFO as the main oscillator. To do this, we're going to send the LFO output to the input on the VCF. This will allow us to listen the LFO. Now, to control the frequency of the LFO, we can use the output from the keyboard directly to the FM input on the LFO. We can make another quick patch using the LFO as a clock source by sending the square waveform output from the LFO to the gate inputs. Also, we can create a simple but powerful kick drum with the tools we have on the panel. First, we're going to trigger the gate with the LFO on the square waveform. We need a cable from the LFO output to the gate input. Now let's use the envelope generator to send modulation to the VCO exponential FM input. Now let's play a little bit with our knobs. And we can actually increase the modulation to emphasize the resonance. Finally, we use the modulation from the keyboard. We can have two types of kick drums in the same patch. So let's send the keyboard output to the filter input. One key thing to remember is that our Werkstatt also have voltage control inputs. This means that we can also use some sequencers like the OPC from Teenage Engineering. We can send some CV pitch signals, also gate signals from the OPC to the Werkstatt. So that's why, in addition to everything explained so far, the Werkstatt is an excellent analog synthesizer for bass. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Yo soy Leo Méndez y nos vemos a la próxima.